Susan has pondered this issue for years, and what is true relating, and how does Gendlin's philosophy help us with that? What what is meant by fitting in or pouring out, and how do we deal with conflict? So I'm very eager to hear this and to share this with you. And I've always thought of July 4th as Interdependence Day, because we true independence is interdependence, and interdependence is really hinges on our ability to relate and to deal with conflict and clashing of needs. And so it seems very fitting that we should talk about this paper on Independence Interdependence Day. Those of you who aren't from the United States, this is probably just an ordinary summer Monday. And so you'll let us know what the ordinary summer Monday thoughts are. So I want to introduce Susan as one of our team members for our community empowerment project, and you're going to be hearing more about that project as this training that we've done for 10 months is coming to a close, and we'll be having a new one starting in October. And Susan is a long time focusing oriented therapist. And I think of Susan as someone who is a senior ponderer of authenticity. And there's a video focusing conversation with Susan, a couple of them, on my YouTube channel about authenticity. So you can look that up later. Okay, Susan, you're on.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lynn, for this beautiful introduction. It's really exciting to see all of you. Please let me know if you can't hear me, because sometimes people have trouble hearing me. It's really exciting to try to bring certain parts of this paper to you, certain parts that mean a lot to me. And even though, I know that you've read it, I keep finding new things when I read it, new aspects touch me. And I hope that will be so for you. So we will see. So let's take a breath, a pause, be a couple breaths, and feel our sitting, our being together. So I'm just going to outline certain things in the paper as a way to get into it. For those of you who haven't read it or don't have it, it's very easy to get by you just Google Gene Gendlin and then the title, Fitting In, Pouring Out, and Relating, and it comes right up. Melinda will also put that in the chat. So what I'm going to focus on in the paper today is conflict. This is what struck me the first time I read it. I think because I don't think I'm good at dealing with conflict. It scares me. I was brought up to, keep things nice. But I can sense how keeping things nice, it's kind of sits on the life of things and of people, so that, more is needed. But it's not easy for me. So when I read this, it really knocked me over. not only because he deals with conflict, but the tone of it is so encouraging and so forgiving, really, of one's constant failures, that it was very heartening. And also, his sort of solution has to do with being real, not sitting on oneself. And that was very heartening to me too, because I felt often that I wasn't very real being with people. Okay, so I'm going to try to give you a sense of all of that. He first talks about fitting in and pouring out. And I think he sees them as part of relating, but sort of pre-stages, because in themselves, they're not real relating. You can sense fitting in, which has a feeling of narrowing and compression, that it's not expansive. He says it's a way of putting oneself away and going along with the setting, doing what we think people expect us to do, but not coming from deep inside. It's being your role. And at one point in society, he says this was necessary and it was helpful, was grounding for people, and maybe they even felt real, but that it doesn't work anymore. More is needed than that. So the second way of relating, or partially relating, he calls pouring out. And that's what it sounds like. Pouring out from your guts, from your depths, your feelings, your passions, your arguments, your individuality, and regardless of where it's going and to whom it is being poured out on. Pouring out in itself is really about the person who is pouring out. It's not, doesn't take into account the other person, where they're at, what they might be feeling. So it's kind of is in conflict. Of course it's there. We pour out because we feel passionate about something. I hope you can hear me. It's okay. And it's necessary, but in a way it's like a ship that goes way up a big wave, and it has to be righted for the ship to continue its journey. I mean, it has to find a balance. So what it means, and what Gene Gendlin says, is relating is more than fitting in and more than pouring out. So it can take those two ways of being, along with it. And he says, first of all, that real relating, can take a very long time for us to develop the skills, and that it may look like fitting in because it's comprised of listening carefully to the other person, making sure that the other person understands how we mean something that we say. So how what we say lands is it's probably more important than what we think we say. It's, what they take from it. Sensing our real motives in speaking is also important, because so often we mean we have more motives than we realize. We could be trying to get back at the person, trying to show them we're right, all kinds of things. And that we need to have a sense to of what, what we're about. He says too that we need to be able to stop when the other person can't listen anymore. I find this a really good one because I see how I don't want to stop. It feels so good, to be speaking what I really feel. That the last thing I want to do is stop or curtail it to get a sense of how it's being received. But that's what relating is. So Gendlin says you have to sense what the other person can stand. Because it may be very hard for them and painful what they are hearing. So I thought that was really interesting. That you can see that how this is different from fitting in, because the intention is not to be compliant and not ruffle the waters. It's the intention is to relate. It's to get across to the other person and to have them get across to oneself. Why is this so hard? Why does it take years to feel more comfortable with? Well, conflict is uncomfortable because it's two sides. It's not just our side, and the other side can be very different from ours. Gendlin calls us snowflakes, and he says no two snowflakes are alike. He also says it feels good to pour out if you're on that side, and it feels bad to be poured out upon. It feels good to be sharing from deep down and saying what you really think, not fitting in, bursting those bounds. But what's coming on to the other person can feel overwhelming. It can feel like an attack. I can remember about 10 years ago having a problem with a friend where I felt that she just wasn't there for me in a couple of interactions we had. And I felt that to be true to myself and to our growing friendship, I had to bring this up. So I was a little afraid. I was afraid, but I made myself. And I remember the feeling of pouring out how good it felt, to finally be honest and say what I really felt. I was completely shocked that she didn't like this at all. In fact, she was shattered. She couldn't take it in. It made no sense to her. And she said she felt blindsided. It really was kind of the end of a friendship that had was starting. And it was really hard for me I was so surprised by this. And I see, that I had the feeling that how I saw things, because they felt so right, my interpretation. I expected her to get it and to feel the way I felt. So here is, I think, a good example of well-meaning pouring out that really went horribly wrong. So, in this article, I kind of kept an eye out for what can help us to go beyond what I just described. And Gendlin, well, besides these things I've mentioned about being careful of the other person, Gendlin gives hints and he says, well, you can, in the middle of some great conflict, it's really hard to think, right? At least for me. And he says that you can try to step back inwardly. To me, that's take a pause. And it says make room inside for your own reaction. Just that. Stopping, taking a breath, getting a sense of where you yourself are. I think that's enormous. And then he says, you can also, in this making space, inner space, room for the other person, just for being receptive to what they're saying, for trying to see the sense in it, or, how one could think the way they seem to be thinking and feeling. And this reminded me actually of focusing, where we pause, where we welcome what we feel, and try to be with it. It also made me think of another example from my life that I'll briefly tell you. And this is more recent, and I think I have told the people in force this because it occurred a few months ago. My roommate, I live with somebody a bit younger than myself, and she was kind of pouring out on me, telling me how unhappy she was, how dissatisfied she was living with me. This was really hard to hear, even though I was dissatisfied with her. It was hard, very hard to hear. It made me what? Wow, it made me a little angry. It scared me. And at one point she said, maybe she should leave. And I just shot back, well, maybe you should. And as that came out of me, I could feel, I was starting to pour out myself. And I was just reacting out of hurt and anger. I was sort of slamming her back. And it hit me very hard. I had this moment when I could see that I was going down a path that was going to close completely our communication. And I knew I did not want her to leave. So I backed up. I could feel that inside myself and kind of turned. And I remember thinking, if she leaves, that's the worst that can happen. And I'll have to face in myself the parts of me that make people want to go away from me. And I can face it. All that sort of flashed. So I felt I could be there for the hard stuff in this conversation. And somehow we just started talking. And I remember saying to her, the only thing I know to, help when people have trouble, I have trouble with people, they have trouble with me, is to try to listen and try to be honest. And somehow, that doesn't sound like much, Well, it was a lot. And we were able to bring our conversation down from being so inflamed and talk to each other and feel so much more about each other, about the caring, and the sadness that we were having so much trouble, and the wanting to have something better for each of us. And at the end, I remember feeling just deeply happy. And everything wasn't all smooth, but it was having gone through something very hard and trying to stick with it that I felt we both did. It was so heartening. So, Gendlin saying, step back, take a breath, and be kind to your own reaction and try to make room for the others. I think really that's quite a wonderful thing to do. And it's a focusing room, and the whole process of focusing, I think, builds within oneself kind of a listener to oneself and to other people, and builds a self that can carry disparate, difficult emotions and thoughts. And I think all that helps with conflict. So I don't know, have I talked about enough, Lynn? Enough time?
Well, I think that we could sit and listen to you all day, or at least I could. But if is there anything what you were saying to me at the beginning about how this paper is like a flower and it keeps
Mhm.
opening and opening and opening to you was so intriguing to me. And I wondered if there's anything about that opening that struck you this last time when you were preparing for this
Well,
reflection.
I was just reading before we came together, this paragraph. Maybe I could read a little bit of it
Mhm.
because, well, maybe you'll see. He, oh, where can I start? He says that knowing we are unique, each one of us is a snowflake, a different snowflake that can let us endorse both sides of the need for a totally right relationship. And he says that deep inside, we all want to be completely accepted, understood just as we are with all our flaws. And and that's a need that shouldn't be defeated, shouldn't be put away, and that you have to grow out of, but that it has to be taken with a grain of salt too. And maybe you'll hear that. We can ensure that need does not get defeated inside. It should be sustained, not argued down or put away. On the one side, we become able to endorse the need to be received just as we are without having to work at it, but with a knowing smile to ourselves, because we also know that we have to work at it. We need to build the skills to make it possible, and that will take time. On the other side, we can endorse our inner sense that nobody should ever dump bad stuff onto our readiness to love them, but again with a smile, because of course we also know that will happen, but we're becoming more able to protect our receptivity, though we can't always, if we wish to hear from someone really. And that really moved me because he says, do you want the other person as they really are, or do you want a compliant one you know, and he says at the end, of course, what does he say? No actual other being exists just to fit us. It could only be a false merger. The other person silent and shut away, just pretending. We wouldn't want it. Better the unique and uniquely troublesome other person. And that's us
That
too.
is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
why don't we just take a
yeah,
breath here and then see what people have to say there?
yeah.
That was so beautiful the way you read that, Susan.
Thanks.
Maybe you could send us that quote.
I'd like her to read it again.
Okay. Shall I? Let's see. There is an inner longing that others should fit us exactly and still really be themselves. I think I didn't read that before, but it's real good. We can endorse the longing, but again with a smile. Of course, we want both fit and realness, but we get both only in spots. I think this is a new quote. I'm sorry. Each
I
page,
did anyway.
each page is
And
an
then put both of them in the chat for us.
oh
Perfect.
boy. Okay, it's going to take me a while. No other being exists just to fit us. That's it. It could only be a false merger. The other person, silent and shut away, just pretending. We wouldn't want it. Better the unique and uniquely troublesome other person. I think that's it.
That was great.
Better the unique and troublesome
Troublesome.
other person.
Yeah, but real person.
Yeah.
Real person, yes.
Yeah. So I'm very eager to know what what touched you, what resonated, and what you all feel about this conflict. Just the whole topic of conflict, how that is for you, any of that. It's a lot.
What struck me, and thank you for your authenticity here. I really felt it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of the pouring out, like certain relationships where there's pouring out and I'm being poured on, and it's not about me, it's about the other person's life. But there's so much detail and there's so many words and so much energy that I start to feel smothered. And when you said about Gene Gendlin, like you could take a pause, and make some space inside,
Yeah.
that felt really good. And then I'm noticing there's an inner conflict between the flattery of knowing that this person is coming to me to be their container, their mommy, like I have to tell you what happened. And also the feeling of that, oh, too much,
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I know that you have to make a big container sometimes. That helps me too.
It's such a complicated art to represent yourself, but your larger, deeper self in such a way that doesn't shut down the other person or make them wrong or bad. And that kind of situation, Laura, is so difficult to say. I'm filled, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm filled up right now with the details. I need a breath, or something. And that's the art. There is no right way to say it, but the feeling of trying to make room for the other person and making room for oneself.
Sometimes I think, it just is very, very imperfect or bungled. And then I think you said this, Lynn, it's sort of out rather than all tightly knotted within
Yes.
yourself. And you can see it better. And then there can be some possibility of repair.
Right. That's
But
right.
sometimes you have to make a mess.
Yep.
Um, this is this is Claudia. I didn't read the paper, but as I listen to you, that reminds me the relationship is like a dance. So fitting in is when the other person is stepping on you when you dance and you don't say anything.
Mhm.
Polygon is when you're stepping on,
Yeah.
Yes.
right? And then some people just never know how to dance.
Right.
And so each partner is a different relating.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
such
it's
a good
different.
point, Claudia.
Each is a new relationship, a new relating, a new moment.
I really appreciated, Dorothy, I really appreciated this paper. I so fond of the paper, but to hear you talk about it, it just came more and more alive for me. It's like when you said you read it over and over and get something new. It's like I feel I just can't get enough of it. There's just, and a line that stood out is when you repeated, do you really want the other person? Do you want the person as they really are, or to be compliant with us?
Mhm.
And I have to admit, I really do want the person to be compliant with me often first. And there's just this huge drive, like a need, like emerging, like a twinship, like it's so
Yeah.
strong in me. And so I have to really work at sometimes, especially if the person, it's a conflict and there's this other point of view, I have to work very hard, I feel, on having the person as they are or getting to that point. And I find my daughter's been my greatest teacher, my young adult daughter in this regard, because she has taught me to hang in there. And she's often said, Mom, you always disappear. When it gets tough, you just disappear. And over time, I realized she was right. And there's a tremendous reward in hanging in there. And I'm thinking of a friend I have that used to be a dear friend, but we had a conflict, and I'm having such difficulty approaching it. So instead of responding quickly to her response to me, I'm just waiting. I'm really waiting. I'm gathering, like today I gathered more information about how to approach this rather than come at like I have to make my point of view.
Yeah.
And just stepping back from that and really gathering a much fuller picture. And that I don't have to say this is my point of view. I can just leave it open for now. Maybe that's what I'll share. Something.
So much more air and
I'm
space
thinking
in
a lot.
that.
Thank you so much.
Well, Dorothy, I really know what you mean about wanting the harmony and the agreement, having somebody agree with me rather than feeling different. It feels like alone when you have to be different, and so good to have the, what is it? To have the harmony or the sameness. I'm trying to speak to what I thought you were saying. Yeah, I mean, that seems very strong in some of us. You know, wanting agreement. Maybe it's like how we grow up, you know, and teenagers want to be part of the crowd.
I think the pull has to, this is Lynn. I think the pull has a lot to do with wanting to connect, wanting to be part of a unit or some kind of wanting to be with another. And how to be with another is something we've obviously learned from growing up, but this moving towards conflict or resolving conflict is not always part of our toolkit. And I think it's an ongoing process. But the pull to want to connect, I think makes this kind of pausing and creating space for ourselves and the other so essential.
Mm,
Right.
yes.
So
It occurs to me that for Heinz Kohut, who is the founder of self-psychology,
Right.
that need for twinship is one of the 3 essential ingredients of well-being, that we want that sameness. It's the easiest way to connect is through the sameness, and that it's just a basic human need. And so it takes a lot for us to be able to transcend that need while still taking it into account and honoring it.
I'd like to say something. This is very good direction, and I see a lot of merit here. But I've been in situations, and maybe some of you can relate to, that when the person is pouring on me, I find it intolerable in some situations. It's like eating food that you have to spit out because it's so distasteful. So that, for me, that's the challenge to an otherwise very good direction here.
Yes, yes. But I think that what you're saying, Bob, is very much in the spirit of Gene's paper, that we don't want to just fit in with the other person's need to pour out. We always have to be with ourselves and honoring our own needs and finding space for ourselves and taking care of ourselves in order to take care of the other person. And I think we often err in the direction of sacrificing ourselves to take care of the other person, and then we either collapse, or we want to retaliate, or we want to distance, or we lose the feeling for the other person. It just doesn't work. But it also doesn't work to take care of ourselves and sacrifice the other person and forget about them. I thought your story was a beautiful one, Susan, about that with your roommate.
I think this is Beth. I think there's another thing that makes this difficult, and that is when the other person is not on the same page about wanting to work at this, because that's more often than not, unless you've been, I mean, I think with some people I've practiced this for a long time, and it took a long time to get it so that we recognize, oh, we're in this place and now we must back off, and both of us, look at the other and really listen. But with some people, it's so threatening to be in conflict. I mean, as you were describing, that they do, as Dorothy said, they just disappear, or
they get very angry.
Mhm.
In a
Right.
way, we can't go further than the other person. I mean, we're really two sides of one interaction. I mean, we need the other person as much as we can't just forge ahead ourselves. It's not a relationship then.
Mm. Mhm.
That's a hard thing to learn, I think, for me.
Mm.
It seems so important.
Sort of like being two oxen yoked together, pulling
Yeah.
a cart. And then if we think of it in the broader terms of political situations, it becomes even more complicated and difficult.
Yeah. How would you put that?
Well, two sides of a political opinion are yoked together, and you can't just go ahead with your side of things and leave that other oxen behind. It's just you're yoked together and responsible for this cart that you're pulling.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, you can't go each one direction.
Yes,
Different
you can't go
directions.
in two different directions very
Oh.
easily.
Yes, and then both oxes, I mean, and both creatures, lose out, and you can't get anywhere. So yeah, you need one
Yeah.
another, because that's a given that we are with one another. Yeah.
So that's so interesting. I mean, that makes me think of how connected we are, and even when we don't know it, or when we think the last person we're connected with is our adversary, last person we want to be connected with, we just are.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
This is Roberto. Thank you, Susan. You gave me a lot to think about. I see this couple that initially, at times, they fight the whole session, and there's nothing I can say.
Mm.
And then the only thing I can do, I guess, is making space for them and for me, and be present. And then it seems to be that lately they think that when they do that, when they just really nasty at each other for an hour, and that they can be themselves, and there's value to that. Because say things like, oh, we got to be respectful to Roberto, but I don't expect that. But then afterwards, it's like they feel that they can be themselves. Um, but I remind myself that I want to be present for them,
Yeah.
and without saying much.
But then you're part of it too, Roberto, right? That if they're sort of pouring out on each other with you, you're part of the interaction too, and you have your unique, individuality there and needs.
Hello, this is Sophie. Thank you, Suzanne. This is lots to reflect, think about. There's one piece also that is sticking or is staying with me. The piece when he says something like that we want to be received as we are, and then we smile because we know that we want to be received as we are without working at it. And then, there's this pause and then you smile. Oh yeah, when is that possible? Is that ever possible, really, as an adult? And I love this moment, this was the smile where I catch the sense that of his relationship to himself there, how he's relating with kindness to himself, acknowledging, oh, this is what I wish deeply. And yeah, is, most likely it will not happen, and it's okay. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
To be in relationship with oneself that way, to really acknowledge that's what I need, and probably it's not going to happen, and it makes me smile.
Thank you, Sophie, for bringing that part out, the smile, of it's okay. Right? My Freudian supervisor used to lean back in his chair and say, "Oh, it's a schmutzy business. It's okay." I wonder if we should have a brief attunement and go into our breakout rooms now and talk with each other and then come back at 9:30. That sounds like right timing.
Sure.
Susan, you were going to give us a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
way of speaking with each other.
So let's take a couple of breaths. After so much thinking, just sense how we are now, how we're sitting, how we're feeling, how our feet are, where our feet are. And all that we've been thinking about and sensing and feeling about being with other people, other difficult people, people we need, and bringing up, letting come up some time when you had a conflict with somebody. It can be something really small if you want. Doesn't have to be a traumatic thing, or it could be a traumatic thing. Just let yourself have what you need and what you can handle. So just let something come up when you and the other person did not see eye to eye, and it wasn't very comfortable. And let yourself have time to sort of scan the situation, how you're feeling, what comes up in your gut, see how the other person is feeling too. And step back a little inside. What is needed to unlock things, to let them move? What do you need inside yourself, perhaps? And let yourself stay with that for a bit. With if you could have it could come. What's needed for the next step to happen, for things, to move forward. Unlock. Maybe something small. Just take note of that. Kind of file that away. Might be something that you can share if you wish. And in your own time, come back to the group.
Thank you, Susan.
Welcome, Lynn.